I'm giving myself 1 month to recreate the original Super Mario World in 3D. That includes making the player, power-ups, enemies, and literally everything else. The first thing I need to do is recreate all of Mario's sprites in 3D, and... oh. This might take a while. Well, the models are done, so now that the hard part's over, we can move on to the next step where we'll be animating Mario. I made all the necessary animations like running and jumping and crouching for some reason, and when we put this all together, the player starts looking pretty good. But currently, we're just wandering around in the middle of nowhere. So let's start by creating a block out of the stage, which I'll use as a guide for building the environment. I used the ground tiles from the original game to begin working on the textures in 3D, but I ran into a small problem. Since the original game is viewed in 2D, we only have access to a view of the ground tiles from the side. This meant I'd have to get creative with how I would texture the grass. My first couple attempts, yeah, we don't need to talk about those. But eventually I found a pattern I was okay with, so I applied it to the environment, and that completes the base of the level. But it's still pretty empty, so let's bring it to life by adding the classic Super Mario elements, like the pipe. Pipes allow the player to teleport from one location to another, just like they do in the original. And they also don't work half the time, which is great. And along with the pipes, I also modeled a bridge tile that's used to connect different parts of the map. And besides the bridge, I still need to recreate a lot of the interactive tiles from the original game, starting with the block. The process for recreating the block was pretty simple. I began by copying the texture in 2D and then reshaping it into a 3D cube. When Mario hits his head on a block, it'll start spinning in place and the player will be able to pass through it without collision. I also made the shatter effect that plays when the player spin jumps on top of the block, causing it to break apart. Making the question block was a pretty similar process. In the original game, hitting a question block will spawn a power-up for Mario to collect. I repeated the same process for modeling the block, as well as adding an animation where the block pops up in the air when the player jumps and hits it. In our current version, if the player tries to hit the question block, nothing pops out. So I think it's about time we start working on the power-ups. First up is the mushroom, which I made a simple model for. Collecting the mushroom transforms Mario from his mini form into his full size, allowing the player to take an extra hit of damage. Getting hit a second time causes a game over, so I put together a death model along with an animation to match the original game. The next power-up is the fire flower. The fire flower works similar to the mushroom, except it gives the player the ability to shoot fireballs, and more importantly, changes Mario's color. The player can shoot up to 3 fireballs at a time, which will bounce across the ground until they hit an enemy. But currently, we don't have anything for the player to hit or take damage from, so I think we should finally add enemies. Specifically, these two. The first of which is called Rex, and its behavior is pretty simple. In the original game, Rex will move back and forth in a straight line, waiting to make contact with the player. You'll be able to find Rex walking around all over the level where he can be in one of 2 states, a healthy version and a damaged version. I modeled the walking animations for both states, and when the player jumps on the Rex's head, he will enter the damaged state. Jumping on Rex a second time causes him to disappear. Spin jumping on Rex allows the player to kill him instantly, and using a fireball spawns a coin for the player to collect. And you might have noticed I took this opportunity to create a bunch of particles inspired by the original game for when the player interacts with an enemy. This is looking really cool, but we still have another enemy to take care of. Unlike Rex, piranha plants can't move. Instead of walking around, these guys can be found sticking out of pipes. If the player collides with a piranha plant, they'll take a hit of damage. Spin jumping on the plant's head causes the player to bounce in the air, allowing for some interesting platforming opportunities. The only way to kill a piranha plant is by using an indirect attack like a fireball. And not only does that get rid of the plant, but it also gives you access to the pipe it was guarding. So far, the game has been coming together really well, but it wouldn't be Super Mario World without Yoshi. After making Yoshi's models, and it was a lot of models, the player now has the ability to mount Yoshi. I modeled the egg that Yoshi can be broken out of, along with an effect for when it breaks apart. Yoshi also has this little animation when he appears, which makes for some very interesting models. Each level in Super Mario World also has 5 dragon coins, which I recreated and placed across the map. To recreate Yoshi's eat ability, I modeled his tongue in 2 separate parts. When the player tries to eat something, Yoshi will enter the animation, and if his tongue collides with anything edible, he'll eat it. I guess edible wouldn't be the right word, because he also eats coins somehow. And one of Yoshi's features within the original game is his ability to eat these berries scattered across various levels. If Yoshi eats enough berries, the player will be rewarded with a power-up. I recreated the berry in 3D and programmed Yoshi to be able to eat it. If the player eats all of the berries spread across the stage, they'll gain access to the goalpost and have the ability to complete the level. Walking through the goalpost in the original makes everything on the screen fade to black except for the player. And when I tried it, this happened. But don't worry, because I eventually got it to work. The game is almost finished. There's just a couple things we have left. One of the last things we desperately need is some added visual variety. So I found a couple props from the original game that I could recreate in 3D to make this version feel a lot more like Mario. And along with the props, I used this opportunity to take the massive blue hills from the background of the original and add them to the skyline of this version. Now all that's left to complete is the UI, which I'll make by finding the font used in the original and then designing the display to show how many dragon coins the players collected, how much time is left in the level, and their score, which increases based on different actions from the player. I spent the remaining time in the challenge finishing the stage and patching a couple bugs. And with that, the remake is officially complete. Here's the final result.